Oh, hello. Welcome to the Curious Emporium. Have a look at what we have in store for you.
All right, let's get right into it. We're heading out to one of the most desolate, hostile places on the entire planet, the Gobi Desert. We're here to talk about a creature of pure legend, a story that has haunted nomads and terrified explorers for centuries. We're talking about the Mongolian Death Worm. You gotta hear this description. It comes from way back in 1926, and it was given by none other than the Mongolian Prime Minister to a famous explorer. Think about that for a second. So poisonous that merely to touch it means instant death. This isn't just some animal he's describing, it's a living, breathing weapon. So, what in the world is this thing? To really get it, we've got to start with its local name, because, trust me, the name itself tells you a whole lot about the horror we're dealing with here. Olgoi korkoi. Yeah, you heard that right. It literally means large intestine worm. And no, they're not being subtle. The name comes from its supposed appearance, that it looks exactly like a piece of a cow's intestine. Just this blood-red, thick, horrifying thing out in the middle of the desert. So the stories you hear from the nomads, the ones passed down for generations, they all paint a similar picture. It's a massive, sausage-like worm, anywhere from 2 to 5 feet long. Its deep red color lets it just disappear into the reddish sands of the Gobi, making it the perfect ambush predator. Oh, and some versions of the story say it has sharp spikes at both ends, just in case it wasn't terrifying enough.
But its looks are honestly the least of your worries. It's the worm's abilities that make it the stuff of nightmares. We're not just talking about some big creepy crawly. The legends say it can spit a yellow venom that dissolves whatever it touches, killing you instantly. And if that doesn't get you, it can supposedly generate powerful electric shocks strong enough to kill a camel from a distance. It does all this after popping out from under the sand, usually during the hottest part of the year.
For centuries, this was just a local story, right? A campfire tale to scare people in the Gobi. So how did this incredibly remote legend manage to slither its way across the world and capture the imagination of, well, pretty much everyone? Well, it didn't happen overnight. It started as pure folklore, just stories told from one generation to the next. Then, in 1926, the explorer Roy Chapman Andrews writes it down, and suddenly the West knows about it. Then in the 50s, a Soviet scientist, who also happened to be a sci-fi writer, popularizes it in that part of the world. But the real explosion? That happened in the 1990s, after the fall of the Soviet Union, when Mongolia opened its borders and Westerners could finally go looking for the beast themselves. But here's the thing. Even back in the 20s, Andrews noticed something really interesting. Everyone he talked to, they believed in the worm. They knew what it looked like, what it did. But when he asked if they'd seen it themselves, the answer was always no. It was always a friend of a friend, or their cousin who lived over the next ridge. It's that classic "I know a guy who saw it" story, which is a hallmark of folklore. So let's fast forward to the modern era. A whole new generation of adventurers and cryptozoologists heard these stories, and they were determined to find this thing. They were going to go out there and bring back proof. And look, these weren't just weekend camping trips. These were serious expeditions. One Czech explorer, Ivan Makerle, was so inspired by the sci-fi novel Dune that he built thumpers to pound the ground, hoping the vibrations would attract the worm. He even set off small explosives. Others, like Richard Freeman, spent weeks crisscrossing the desert, interviewing every witness they could find, trying to pinpoint a location. Okay, so you have all these dedicated people, all this time, money, and technology poured into the hunt. All these expeditions into one of the most remote places on Earth. So, after all that, what did they actually find? What's the sum total of physical, verifiable proof? Zero. A big, fat zero. Absolutely nothing, not a body, not a piece of shed skin, not a drop of that supposed venom. There's not one single clear photograph or video that can be verified. After all that searching, they found zilch. So, that's the big puzzle, right? If there's no proof, then where did this incredibly detailed, very specific, and widely believed story come from? Is it just something someone made up? Or could there be a real animal out there that got exaggerated into a monster? Well, the leading scientific theory is a simple case of mistaken identity. And the main suspect is this guy, the Tartar sand boa. Now, think about it. It lives in the Gobi. It's a big, thick-bodied reptile, and, this is key, it burrows and travels under the sand. The similarities are there.
In fact, one time, some locals who swore they'd seen the death worm were shown a sand boa, and they said, yep, that's it. So the idea is that the real snake is the kernel of truth, and all the crazy stuff, the venom, the electricity, that's just legend getting piled on top over the centuries.
But what if it's not just one animal? The death worm might actually be a kind of monster mashup, a creature built from sightings of several different things. The worm-like body could come from a burrowing reptile called a worm lizard. The story about spitting venom, maybe that's an exaggerated tale brought back by travelers who saw spitting cobras somewhere else. Or maybe the whole thing is just a story, a boogeyman invented by parents to keep their kids from wandering out into the dangerous Gobi Desert alone.
So you'd think, with no evidence and a bunch of good explanations, the story would just fade away. But that is not what happened. In fact, the Mongolian death worm is more famous now than ever. Why? Because the monster escaped the desert. It's become a pop culture superstar. I mean, think about the graboids from the movie Tremors. Giant worms that travel under the sand? Total death worm vibes. The giant sandworms in Dune? Same inspiration. It's a monster in video games, from Fallout to Final Fantasy. It's been hunted on TV shows. It's everywhere. And that constant exposure keeps the legend alive and kicking for a whole new audience.
But I think the real reason we're still obsessed with this story is because it taps into something really fundamental. In a world that feels like it's been completely explored, mapped, and explained on Google Earth, the Gobi Desert is one of the last places that feels truly vast and empty. It's a place that could still hide secrets. And the death worm? It represents that thrilling possibility that maybe, just maybe, there are still monsters out there.
And that's really what it comes down to, isn't it? Whether it's a real undiscovered animal or just a case of a mistaken snake, the legend of the Algoi Korkoi makes us ask ourselves a question. In our modern world, where we have answers for almost everything, what's the real value of a mystery we can't solve? Maybe some monsters are more important to hunt than they are to actually find.